Hey everybody, so I wanted to welcome you back to my gaming corner. As you can see in front of you, what we're going to be starting tonight is the chapter 1. This is going to be the continuation from the prologue that I posted up not too long ago. And before we actually get into starting chapter 1, there is some housekeeping items that I need to take care of. Some stuff that I didn't get correct in the last mission, and I wanted to go over that real quick. I don't want to hold on to it for too long. I did mention some of those mistakes in the comments, or we talked about them in the comment section of the last video, and I added into the description of the video for the last video. And I'll have a link up to the last prologue video. So if you're just finding this video and you want to see what happened in the prologue, hop on over there. There'll be a link to it, and you can kind of see how we got to this point here on the board. The first thing I wanted to take care of was in the prologue, I was actually switching between the first player for like every round. So I would go blue player and then the orange squad. I kept just alternating between who was actually the first player, basically the first one to act in the new round. Well, when you establish the first player, that is actually done at the neighborhood meeting, and that is done in the day phase. Now, since we hadn't gone through a day phase, we were only supposed to roll 2 dice per squad to see who got the highest results to determine who the first player was. So I should have been staying, like, let's say blue would have gotten the highest roll, or if they had gotten the highest roll, then they would have been the first player for every round. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and establish who the first player should have been by rolling 2 dice per squad. Okay, so for blue, they got a 4. And then we'll roll for the orange squad. Okay, they got a 5. So, in all actuality, the orange squad is going to be the first player until we determine who the new first player is going to be at our neighborhood meeting, actually the first neighborhood meeting that we're going to have. Now, this will be important when we actually start doing some other things that we had to do for the end of the mission, okay, or the end of the prologue. So that is where we get into what our winnings were for that. Okay, so the first thing we needed to do was draw a random survivor from the bottom of the survivor deck for each objective token that went uneaten by zombies. And if you remember, we had 2 here that did not get eaten. We were able to save both of those. So we'll go ahead and draw those 2 right now from the bottom of the survivor deck. And we already had those shuffled out, so we're just going to draw 2. So one is Colonel Glover, and the other one is Dave Marcus. So those are our 2. We're not assigning those to a squad just yet because those are going to be in choosing. We'll have a specific set of instructions to actually divvy those out. The next thing we're going to do is, it says the house is yours. Draw 5 food, 5 resources, and 2 armory cards. Okay, so we'll start with 5 food. Okay, and I'll give these a reshuffle just to make sure that, I don't think I didn't want to say I put the best food or, okay, well, let's see if I can get these, these cards are very, very slippery, I've noticed. All right, so 5 food, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, next is the resources. And that is going to be this deck right here. I will just cut it a couple of times and draw 5 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next are 2 armory cards. All right, we're going to draw those from the bottom. And actually, I don't have to draw them from the bottom. We can draw from the top. So 2 random armory cards. That slingshot needs to be taken out. So keep doing that. All right, so we have a shovel. And we have another shovel. I know I shuffled these cards up. Yeah, they're shuffled. I just got a bad draw. Alright, so apparently we really love melee weapons this game so far, because that's all I've been able to draw. Alright, next is victory points. All right, so if you remember at the end of the match, we had 2 zombies. We had a fresh and a weak zombie left on the board. Now, at the end of the 5th round, once all zombies flee, then we tally up the doom track. Okay, this will be how many spaces that our little zombie friend Meeple is going to move up on the track here. So for every fresh zombie, it's going to move up 2. So 1, 2. All right, so that takes care of that one. He is fled. All right, and we still have our weak zombie here. He's also going to flee. They only get 1 point on the doom track. So for the amount of zombies that I had left on the board, that was 3. That's as far as they moved up. Now, they did not get to the 5th space, which would have been the point where we would have brought in a mutated zombie for our next zombie night. Okay, so if we had gotten here to the 5, we would be bringing in a mutate. However, we did not get that far, so we'll be bringing no additional mutates from the prologue. Now, we may bring a mutate in because Chapter 1 calls for it, or where they actually tell us to put the Doom track on when we start the chapter, but that's neither here nor there. Just from what we did at the prologue, we don't bring any mutates in additional to what the chapter calls for. All right, so next one is going to be my big faux pas for the prologue mission, okay? And that is where, and some of you actually caught that. I didn't catch it, but not until it was all said and done. During turn or round 4, I had both of my guys here. I had the blue squad and the orange squad. I moved out with the orange squad and then moved them back in, okay? And then when it came up to blue's turn, for some reason I don't know, I just, my mind went blank, and I started to make all my moves that were supposed to be for the blue squad. I made them for the orange squad. So I was giving them the XP for the hits. I was giving them the wounds that they took on that. So in doing that, now since they had the exact same weapons, okay, and they had the exact same spacing apart, what I did with them as far as going out and killing the zombies and the amount of XP, all I need to do is shift that over to the other squad. So where I have it right now is orange squad ended up getting about 2 more XP than the blue one did. So in reality, the orange one should be here and the blue one should be here. Neither matter because we both passed the number 5 space, which means both of the squads are going to get a perk. Okay, so I just want to make sure we clear that up. Now the big one was when I drew for the the end of the round when it was the zombie's turn, and I drew the critical wound for the orange squad. Well, in reality, it would have been the blue squad. So I've gone ahead and I've moved that wound over to Kenneth or Kenny Maurer, which was the one who received the critical wound. So both Kenny and Summer have critical wounds that are staying with them right now, and they're both head wounds. And I've made sure that the health on them reflects what it should have been at the end of the round. And at the time, the last one, I think I had to divvy up 4 damage to this group, which was the orange squad, and I needed to put that back over to the blue squad. So I'm going to go ahead and take their armor all the way down to 0 from 3 and distribute 1 wound to Summer. That way, those 4 wounds that went to the orange squad, because they were the ones standing there when it should have been blue, actually go to the blue squad. All right, I think that was everything that needed to be done as far as carryover from the prologue. Okay, so now when we come back, I'm going to go ahead and start the process of getting the hero card, or not the heroes, but the survivor cards divvied up, the weapons, the food, and the resources, and I'll kind of go through those steps. And then we'll also talk about getting the campaign tracker going, because this is important. This is where we actually start listing all the wounds that we have, the critical wounds, the weapons that we have, where we're at, and everything. And it's going to be an important step to start tracking that. And then we'll go ahead and talk about the setup for Chapter 1 and what we're going to need and all that. So when we come back, we'll start that process. All right, guys. So we still have a few things left to do before we can actually go into Chapter 1. And the first thing we need to do right away is the rewards for our prologue gave us 2 survivors and 2 armory cards, which are in effect the same thing. And let's see, 5 food cards, and 5 resources cards. So we got to start divvying all those out. Now, understand that I am playing a completely cooperative game in the fact that I'm the only physical player. I'm playing the game as if it was 2 players, you know, 1 player per squad. So in a regular game where you have multiple people there that are playing, you're going to have some kind of a competition things going on. Now I'm going to try to play those in the manner that the game wants you to play it in. Otherwise, I would just be splitting these up normally, however it would best fit the squads. But through my video here, I want to kind of show that process of how it would work in a regular game. So the first thing we're going to need to do is recruit our new survivors. See, these 2 survivors are available to both squads, so we basically have to fight over which of these survivors that we want with our squad. So what we're going to be doing is it's a contest, and we're using our talk attribute for this contest. So the first thing we need to do is we create a dice pool for each of our squads. So that's the same process that we went through before. We have two survivors in each squad, so each of them are going to be getting 4 dice, 2 dice for each survivor, and then we create our pool. Okay, so this is not a really great pool for the blue squad. So a 3, a 2, and 2 1s. All right, we'll go ahead and repeat that process with the orange squad. They didn't do too hot either, but they did a little better. 4, 2 2s, and a 1. All right, so now we've created both of our action pools here. We select one of the survivors per squad to perform the contest talk. So probably would be a good idea to choose the one that has the highest thing. But we already know just from looking at it that orange squad is going to win because they have the 4, and there's just no way we can beat that, and I'll tell you why. Already, my 2 stats for each survivor is a 2. It's their base stat in talk. However, they both have a head wound, which gave them a -1 talk. They're both the exact same. So, even though we have this dice pool here that we can use, and we're only choosing 1 survivor to perform the contest talk, each of them can only, it doesn't matter which one I choose, they both have the same stat of 1 because of the head wound, which means they can only select 1 dice to perform this test in, which means if I select Kenny or Summer, they're only going to be able to select this one as their highest one, 3. So down here, we have Marcelina or Teresa. They both have a 2 in their stat, which means they can use up to 2 dice. Whichever survivor I pick for the test, they can use 2 dice to create their number that they're going to compete with. So if I say Marcelina picks 2, I'd go with these 2 right here, which would be a 6. Obviously, the 6 beats the 3. So this squad is going to have first choice in the survivor that they're going to get. All right, so yellow's going to go first. Let's see, they need to choose, we'll kind of be nice about it. We'll go ahead and go with Colonel Glover. All right, so he's going to be our 3rd survivor. And then the blue squad is going to be next. They'll just get the remainder here. So now that we've chosen that, we have our survivors divvied out. Normally, you can add things to those dice rolls to kind of pump up your numbers. Okay, so let's say blue squad could have only rolled a 1, or could have only used a 1, which in their instance they could only use 1 dice, and it was a 3. Not very high, but let's say they actually had some food cards. They could offer those cards to the they could offer them at kind of they could put them up as an offering, I should say, which for every food card they would offer up, it would add 1 action point to their roll. Okay, so if they wanted to add, let's say, 5 food cards for some reason, they could say, well, my 3 now becomes an 8. All right, and if the orange squad didn't want to offer up any food, well, then the blue squad would then have won that contest, so then they would get first pick. Seeing as how neither of the squads had any food cards to offer, because we haven't gone through those yet, because the survivors were divvied out first as per the rewards, we don't have access to these food or resources or armory cards just yet, not until after the survivors were given out. So we only had our regular dice pools and our survivor stats to work with on that. And another thing that you want to remember too when taking these tests is that if one squad had a fewer number of survivors, let's say I had 3 survivors on blue but only 2 survivors on my orange squad, this squad automatically, the squad with the fewest amount of survivors would get 2 action points added to their roll. And if you had some that were tied for the fewest, like say 2 squads had the fewest number, and they would both get those 2 additional action points. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we got to divvy up these resources that are here. Now we don't have to do a contest or anything for those. What we're going to do is we start with the first player, and then we go in turn order, just kind of divvying those things out. All right. So the first player is going to choose the armory card, the shovel, and we're going to equip that with Colonel Glover. All right, and then we're going to go to the next player, blue squad, and we're going to give the shovel here to Dave Marcus. And then we're going to go back to the first player. We're going to give a food here. I'm going to do a food here, food here, food here, food here. Then a resource is going to go here, 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 and here. All right, so now we have fully given out everything that's going to be used. And in our next phase, I'm actually going to talk about the amount of space that each person can use and carry. Now that is only going to come into play during the nighttime phase. Before that, you can actually carry as much as you need to, as much as you want around. You'll actually have to create some stashes on the board to be able to move the stuff that you can't actually carry around at night. And we're going to go over into those things. So the next thing we're going to talk about is taking everything that we've gotten here, and we're going to move that over to chapter 1. Our final thing that we're going to go ahead and handle now is the level up. If you recall, last in the prologue, both of our squads reached the 5 space here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to reach over and grab the perk cards here, and we're going to we're going to take a number of cards from that deck, and it's basically however many players we have in the game plus 1. We're going to draw 3 cards. We're still starting with the first player down on the bottom here. All right, we'll go ahead and reveal our perks. One is a skill. Just put the adjuster on it. This survivor gains +1 mechanic. Next one is a mutation. Spend 1 radiation token to gain this perk. Stronger, +2 health, +1 armor, clumsy. So there's a trade-off to that. However, we cannot buy this mutation because none of our survivors have any of the radioactive symbols on them to spend it on. So we cannot do that one. And our next one is a skill. You should have looked at that. The survivor gains +1 medic, or I don't even know what that's called, but that is first aid +1. So I guess that is first aid. All right, so that's our 3. And if we're starting with that, I like the mechanic skill here. All of my guys, let's see, my 3 people here that we have a 0, a 2, and a 1. I kind of wanted to put it on her since that would make her really good in the mechanic skill for later tests. So let's go ahead and put that skill on her. So we'll actually up her mechanics by 1. All right, we're going to replace that perk card. And we have a skill here. Lesson 1, use the pointy end. The survivor gains +1 melee. Let's do our melee skill. I might not have her too long since she's already got a head wound. So, let's do that. Yeah, let's go ahead and give her the pointy end. All right, so now that is all finished up. So what we're going to do now is finally be able to move on to chapter 1. So when we come back, we'll go ahead and talk about that setup and how everything is laid out and see about getting that mission started. All right, so cleaned up things just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and start talking about chapter 1 now, finally. So our objective for chapter 1 is to complete the fix the truck crafting card and then use the truck to get away from the house before it's overrun. All right, so we already know that as far as crafting goes, we're going to need to find the fixed truck and the workbench card. So we know we have the fixed truck, and we'll kind of set that off to the side, make it a little easier later, and then the workbench. Now we can craft other ones when we need to, but we know we need those two at the very least to get the objectives completed. All right, so the next thing is it's going to talk about what our losses are. If all the survivors die in the same night, we lose. If the night phase begins with the doom track at 30, that'll be if the zombies here ever are on space number 30, we've lost, started the night phase. And there are things that we can do to help mitigate that. You know, if we're too far up, we can do some things during our guard period here to actually lower the doom track. So we never want it to get to 30. And then our final one is that the day counter ever reaches 30, then we've lost. So we have our day counter here. It was on this little X space here for the prologue, and for the setup of the mission, or this chapter 1, it wants us to begin the day phase on day 1. So we're starting with that little guy on day 1. Where we'll be is we're going to be starting here because this is our XP progress track. So we're starting on 0. Where it wants to start the Doom track is 5 plus 1 per player. So automatically it's on 5, and plus 1 per player, that brings it to 7 because we're playing like I'm playing a 2-player game. All right, so what this means here is when we get to the night phase, we're already going to have to spawn in a mutated zombie because they've already gotten here to the space where if they get to this one, then they're going to mutate, or a mutation is going to enter the field when we actually make it to the night phase. Now we can, during the guard phase, we can try to bring that back down, but I don't know if I'm going to have enough to spend on that for the first night. So we may be seeing a mutated zombie, probably, most definitely. All right, so, and for the setup of the tiles, it wants us to use the same configuration that we used for the prologue. So we just kept that one here, and that's the one we're going to start with. And once we do that, the only other thing that they want us to note is we need to remove the radio card from the resource deck. All right, so we need to make sure that one is not in there. So we'll pull the radio, and we'll set that one aside, and leave everything else as is. And then we can start it. So we have our winning conditions if we successfully fix the truck, and then we also have an optional one of if we craft the truck bed will actually allow us to bring more than 2 survivors from each squad. So if we want to keep more than just 2 of them that we have that we're going to have to make a choice on, we'll need to make sure to craft that truck bed if we want to bring all of our survivors back with us. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and our next step here, I'm going to talk about what our first step is. We'll be moving into the day phase, or we are in the day phase of day 1. So we're going to be starting with our scavenge task, which is our first task of the day. And all the gameplay is basically going to be taking place for the day out here and inside the safe house. We could even place things out here if we wanted to, if we wanted to place our stash tokens. And like I said, I'll talk more about that when we actually get to that point. But the first one that we're going to go into is task one in the scavenge phase. This is where we're going to be assigning a certain number of our people here to that task and then going out. And then we're going to be using the story booklet once we actually go that task to roll and see where we're going to be going here in the scavenge zone. So when we come back, we'll start task number one.